this is a great conversation to bring to a board. Hey, we want this community involved around this mission that we have. And so how do we deploy strategically those resources we know can come? And when they do come, have the conversation about building that exact community. Again, scalability only comes where that sustainability exists.
Welcome to Cause and Effect, a podcast brought to you by the Dunham Podcast Network.
Here, we will provide a fresh voice that breaks down the most recent leadership lessons, fundraising trends, and the ups and downs within the nonprofit industry.
And our goal? Increasing your effectiveness for more impact.
And welcome to this episode of the Cause and Effect Podcast. I am Trent Dunham, President and CEO of Dunham+Company. Today, two guests with us. First, the founder, chairman of Dunham+Company, Rick Dunham. Welcome. And then Vice President of Dunham+Company, Josh Crowther, both frequent guests on the podcast. We have something very specific to discuss today, and that is the release of the new Giving USA data that came out in mid-June?
Yeah.
Mid-June of this year, looking back on all of the giving data from 2025.
So let me start here.
Okay. Jump right in.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's a lot of conversations about data around giving in America. Well, people need to understand at the outset that Giving USA is the longest running report on charitable giving in America, both in terms of the sources of charitable giving and then the uses. Where does that money end up?
Yeah.
And we have data, quality data that goes back to 1967.
Okay.
So there's nothing quite like it. So we're not trying here to try to predict the future. What we're trying to understand are what are the trends over time that could impact the future.
It's good. Well stated. I have nothing else to say as far as setup goes. But this, obviously, we discuss this almost every year on the podcast. And, you know, there's a lot of probably similar things from year to year, but it amazes me that almost every year there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data that stand out, that are just unique about what happened in the previous year, and then to your point on how that informs what's going to happen in the upcoming year. So maybe, Rick, we'll just start with you from a macro perspective. Is there a summary statement for giving in 2025 or some kind of position that you would give people a brief synopsis of the overarching trends or takeaways from 2025 giving?
That 2025 was a very healthy year for giving. And there are some underlying trends that are not just interesting, but also very informative about the way giving is shifting. And I think some of the indicators for what's going to be happening in the future.
Okay. Healthy. I'm not sure how much we've heard the word healthy and giving, those two words together, over the past 5 years in particular. Feels like it's been a slog, a challenge,
Choppy.
Well, again, let's
word.
just remember, though, that, again, there is a bit of a phenomenon in terms of formal giving. And again, let me give just some more context around this. This data is primarily based on IRS data. That's the major source of the econometric model that's used. And it's really important to understand that this is measuring formal giving to charitable 501c3 organizations. So it's really important because there's a lot of informal giving going around. This is not intended to measure this. This is intended to measure the formal giving. And again, just kind of a bit of a historical background, Giving USA is published through the Giving USA Foundation, which is a public service initiative of the Giving Institute, of which Dunham+Company has been involved. This is our 16th year.
Wow.
So, why I say healthy is because giving grew nearly 6% last year.
Okay.
So it beat inflation. Adjusted for inflation, it grew by 3%. So if you recall, COVID, giving really at the end of 2020 really began to rise. 2021 still, when adjusted for inflation, is still the high watermark of giving. Last year, in current cash, it was $617 billion given to charity.
Yeah.
This is the first time it went over the $600 billion mark. So that's why I say healthy, because it's moved from that trough of 22, 23 began to recover in 24, and then 25, some decent growth in giving.
Yeah.
And the reality is it has to outpace inflation for it to mean anything for an organization, because the reality is costs and everything with it, and particularly for some organizations that are highly exposed to those inflationary pressures. But the reality is for them, they can only spend what additional funds come in. So if we look at the inflation adjusted dollars, really the last few years have been down or flat. If we're talking about the last 4 years, it's down flat. From that high watermark that Rick was talking about in 2021. So that was a great year. And most of the organizations we work with, it was a great year.
That was.
Tough to budget off a great year. Like, hey, next year we're going to see this same amazing growth. No, that's not going to happen. And the reality is dealing with the choppiness and how do you continue to invest wisely in all of that. It was nice this last year to see that inflation adjusted increase across the board.
So, Rick, if we're 6% is a big number, actually, especially considering where we've been, 3% for adjusted for inflation. Okay, tell me this. Is there one thing that you would say is different in that? In other words, were more people giving? Were bigger dollars given? Did more foundations participate? Was corporate giving up? Like, tell me about what are some of the drivers for that increase in giving from 24 to 25?
Giving by corporations was not up. It was up 3.7% in current dollars, so it barely grew at all, pretty flat.
0.5% growth. I mean, it's flat.
Yeah. Giving by individuals went up over 4%, which is good. So that's pretty healthy. Foundation giving was up right at 5.7%, so right equal with total growth. The biggest increase in giving, though, was in bequests.
Wow. It feels like we're entering into a new season of that being the case.
So, when you look at the 5-year, when you analyzed giving by bequests over 5-year tranches, it's going up 20% or more over the 5-year period. And this past year, it went up 20%. So the average annual increase. So part of the conversation, I just came from our meeting of the Giving Institute, and part of our conversation is around this massive wealth transfer. And are we seeing the kind of the front end of that beginning to take shape?
It's a big deal. And Josh, if you're an organization that does nonprofit work, and we're on the front end of this, what are the implications for what do we have to be thinking about organizationally?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, that's now 10% of total revenue given to organizations through bequests. I mean, that's a huge thing. It's that same donor is not going to be repeating that gift likely. So you need to be aware of that. So in terms of investing what you have and thinking about, well, these often large gifts coming through bequests give you a capital runway to do something with it. And so making sure you continue to invest in the correct things, but also not ignoring the fact that this wealth transfer is coming. I still hear from organizations that, it's a thing we want to get to that. We want to get to that. Well, the front of the wave has already begun. And if anyone surfs here, you actually got to be in front of the wave in order to catch the wave. And so that's the yield comes 5-10 years down the track, and we can already see this wave coming. So we should be on that already. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't looked at planned giving extensively now at this point. This is the time that we know the wave is not only coming, now it's upon us. Yeah, we can see it in these numbers, black and white.
Yeah, and I think the level set on this, so everybody understands. The estimate now is sitting at around $124 trillion that's going to be transferred.
That's insane.
Some models are showing like 24 trillion of that will be going to other kinds of expenses. Right now, the estimate is around 20 billion of that being given to charitable organizations. And part of our conference, part of the conversation was, what do we need to do to increase that amount coming to charitable organizations? And to Josh's point, leaning into planned giving right now is super important. And a part of my advice, another former chair and I did a presentation around this this week, and part of our advice was you don't need to be a legal or planned giving expert to realize estate gifts.
Yep.
All you need to do is start communicating the idea that, did you know that you could make a legacy gift to our organization through your will? So you got to start communicating.
Yep.
And I was sharing anecdotally that one ministry that we've worked with for coming up on 3 decades now, I began this conversation 20 years ago they began just to communicate about it. They have no legal expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been getting $100,000, $200,000, $50,000. This year they got $1 million bequest.
Wow.
Well, yeah. Why? Because they communicated that.
Yeah.
They made that an option in the mind of the donor.
And if this is one of the key takeaways from Giving USA's 2025 research, not only should we have a plan, but we should have a view into how to handle those gifts. And so, Josh, you kind of alluded to it when you started talking about bequest gifts coming in to an organization. I really believe there's a temptation if they start to come in semi-regularly to make them part of your cash flow and budgeting. And I just encourage you not to do that. It's completely unpredictable. And I think it puts you in a compromising position if you begin to make that part of your budgeting. However, I do think it is wise to say, if and when we do get bequests of certain amounts, what does that capitalization allow us to do? What could we accelerate with those funds? What could we shore up? Could we pay off a building? Could we refill an emergency fund that we have sitting? Could we accelerate a particular part of our ministry that has really good early indicators? Could we accelerate new donor acquisition? So I think having that strategic conversation at an executive level within your team to say, hey, okay, if we're going to make this a priority over the next few years, we start to get some of these gifts. And I think that is actually a really good conversation for you if you're leading an organization to kind of put his chum in the water for the board. Boards love to contribute in certain ways and ideate. What a great way for them to ideate on something that's really not going to take you off mission or create a lot of complications for your ministry, but they may have a real great idea or two sitting in that conversation of what do we do when we get a gift like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare in order to be ready for, not just to make your donors aware of the fact that you can take these types of gifts, but then what to do once you get one.
Yep.
So if that's one of the key takeaways, Josh, what's another takeaway from the Giving USA 2025 data that would be relevant for our folks to hear?
Yeah, and I think this is where I start to look at the subsector. So if that's how cash is coming in and how people are choosing to give, the mechanisms they're choosing to give by, well, where is that going? And if we look at that subsector of Christian ministries, those churches and religious organizations that we serve, that's a group that, although it is still the largest destination of that giving, it has not outpaced inflation. So there is a reality of with inflation adjusted dollars in mind that we're not actually seeing growth there. So I think that's a charge for us, honestly, in the work that we do in the sector that we work in, that we're not seeing the same growth as some other sectors. We're just not. I mean, there are the changes in behavior, and a lot of the organizations we serve are committed to seeing people continue in religious participation, whether that's frequently attending church, being involved in missions. All of that work is really important because it also shores up the future giving, because we know there's a connection between that same behavior and giving. So that is something that as I saw this, there's kind of the joy of seeing the top line, 3% adjusted for inflation growth, excellent. But when we look at the flat nature of giving to religion, that's a little disappointing to me, because I think we can do better. I think we can see growth there.
And again, just to remind people that when you look at giving to religion, that it's set up on the National Taxonomy of Exempt Entity Codes. So that means it's focused primarily, only really, on giving to houses of worship, Christian media, and then support organizations around that. So denominational type of thing. So when you think about giving to our clients, if they're an international ministry, then it's going to go under international affairs. If it's a local food pantry or something like that, it would go under human services. So I found it really fascinating that the two fastest growing recipient organizations were foundations and public society benefit, which is where national donor advised funds live. So to me, that signals that people are giving heavily into So if you give to a DAF, obviously you're not giving it. You're giving it. The DAF is a charitable institution, but you're then going to distribute that over time.
Right.
So, and both those mechanisms of foundations, most of that family foundations and donor advised funds, again, bodes for future giving to other charitable organizations through those vehicles. So, it's just really fascinating to me how much money people are putting into that.
Is that degrading some of the cash that nonprofit organizations are realizing as a result?
Absolutely.
So we're kind of, it's long-term benefit, but immediate challenge.
Yeah, I think especially donor advised funds, because people are obviously parking money there. And again, there's this massive argument around regulating donor advised funds, which are currently not regulated, because they feel like people are parking money and not giving it away, but that's not true. Over 20% of donor advised funds are given out every year, where the average of foundations is only 5%. I think, get on my soapbox, I think it's more concerned with parking money in a foundation to not serve charitable institutions as aggressively as they could.
Yeah. Yeah. Paying staff to run it. And
yeah,
it's interesting. I think it's a great conversation. What a meaningful analysis of what foundations are actually making a difference and deploying cash into really meaningful work. It's it can be discouraging if people are using those really well-intended mechanisms for less than awesome purposes. But if those two are growing, I think, as charities, we all realize that the predominant entity that's giving funds is the individual.
Right.
And so we kind of talked around that, some of the things that are really impacting giving right now, but distill for us, what's that performance difference from 25 versus 24 for individual giving? We see anything unique?
No, not really.
Yeah, I mean, it's growth, which is good.
Right.
Individual giving has grown, so it continues to grow, which is good. Rick, I'm interested in the way in which they categorize the giving to DAFs. Is that considered the individual giving, or is that now considered a foundation giving?
No, it's an individual gift to a donor advised fund.
Okay, so it's still in the individual giving. So to your point earlier, Trent, like that is not actually being deployed immediately necessarily. 20% is still higher than the average 2%
now,
foundation.
The only exception to that would be like World Vision, I know, has a donor advised fund people can invest it. If it's given there, then it goes to international affairs. If it's an educational institution that has a donor advised fund, then it's considered educational.
Right.
So that would be the only the public society benefit really just recognizes the national donor advised funds like Fidelity, Schwab, National Christian Foundation.
And what's probably interesting for those listening, what would be interesting is, well, knowing that more and more folks are using that mechanism, how do we encourage them to direct the support to the great work that you're doing? Even letting them know, hey, did you know you could give through your DAF here? This is a way in which you can give. Like that mechanism is available to you. And it's amazing, just like Bequests, it's amazing when you let them know over a period of time, you realize larger and larger gifts from these folks who have great intent and are using a mechanism that their accountants have likely told them, hey, pony up and go over here and give it over here, because it's a great way to save on tax. And I'm all about that.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a surge of giving at the end of last year to donor advised funds, primarily because of the change in the tax code, which was eroding the tax favorability of giving starting in 26 for high net worth individuals. So I do think I wouldn't be surprised if the growth in donor advised funds in 2026 ends up coming down a bit.
Yeah, that's the 0.5% floor now on giving for those individuals who are not taking the standard deduction. So yeah, I mean that is a
cap for the real high net worth individuals.
Right.
So there's never been a floor on charitable giving in America ever. So that's the one that I think has people worried.
Mm.
So to kind of continue this conversation around the individual donor, are there certain behaviors within the donor giving from individuals? Okay, if the number of people give it, is it number of people up? Is it number of dollars up? Kind of let's clarify that for our listeners, viewers.
Yeah, not individuals, and that's there's the dollars continue to go up, and we've just talked about how exciting that is. The reality is that participation rate has not, and now what we haven't seen is the full realization of what things like the UCD will do for participation, because the awareness levels we know are super low on that. People don't know the benefit that they can take. So I'm really interested in next year's and then probably 27.
That,
yeah, right. Once people get to their tax returns and like, oh, I could have claimed that. Dang, I didn't keep my receipt. There it is. That's where you start to see the activity change. But participation isn't that the mechanism intended to increase participation, but we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah.
So there's two other points on this I think that are of interest. One is the informal giving, which is pretty substantial, is not being currently measured. This is formal giving to charitable organizations.
So informal, let's define some of that.
So a GoFundMe.
Like GoFundMe.
Yeah.
And there's, so it is surprising how, it's not totally surprising, but that mechanism gets used quite a bit. I mean, I can't tell you in the past year how many people just in our personal family network have gone through stuff in life, and a GoFundMe's been set up to help them with expenses related to a funeral or health issues or whatever it might be. That's categorized as informal giving. So it's not included in the...
Right, because it can't be traced to a charitable organization.
Yeah.
So, and actually this week began conversations with GoFundMe just about their data set and trying to better understand how we could begin to measure that a bit and have that come up alongside the formal giving that's being measured through Giving USA. So I think that's a pretty important point. The other is within the industry at large, again, in our meetings this week, we pointed out that part of the problem with household giving going down is a bit of a self-inflicted wound by charitable organizations that have focused primarily on major gift development because that's where they saw the money.
Yeah.
And so they haven't invested, and boards have been reticent because the ROI isn't as significant to invest in the broad-based support. And one of the things is I heard the conversations going on, and even in my session when people were talking about that, in the back of my mind I was thinking it makes me so happy about the Dunham+Company model because we focus. Let me back up and just say it this way. Most charitable organizations in America try to build their donor file from the top down. And we have a discipline of helping organizations to build it from the bottom up so that you're building out not only a broad base of support that's stable, but then you're really migrating people into mid and major, getting to their level of potential. And I really believe I did a little bit of a real quick comparison with the data that I was hearing in the room and the data that we have in our insights tool, and we definitely are beating the curve. There's no question about that.
And that is an important point because it kind of if you think about giving to religion has always been the biggest cohort of giving. If you think about the behavior of giving to religion predominantly, it's we are in a community doing life together, and we're giving to the cause in which we have shared values around. So in most instances, it's a church, and so we're giving to that entity to help accomplish things that we can't do on our own. Feed the people locally, do missions internationally, run programs for the community, whatever it might be that, have a building we can meet in, all that stuff, right? So it's that group of people coming together, giving sacrificially towards those goals. And as they're involved, what you tend to see in that is that people who are of higher net worth tend to give more over time, increase their giving over time. I mean, I would say across the donor bands, you give more over time just because of your involvement and affinity. But you see those numbers grow with people who do have capacity. And so we're really just mirroring that in a non-church setting, that kind of behavior. Build a community around shared values, shared mission, things that I would love to see accomplished in the world that I can't do on my own, but I can do in community with other people and an organization that helps facilitate that. And then as my affinity and capacity grows over time, I can increase my giving to that org. So really we're just mirroring that behavior in a different way within the donor file for a parachurch organization.
So as you'll recall, a few years ago, we the Giving Institute stood up a special commission around charitable giving in America.
Mm-hmm.
And the report was released a couple of years ago. And I'll never forget one of the major findings was what we have within the charitable sector is a crisis of community, which that's exactly the point you're making. The Generosity Commission showed in research that, and I think, again, that goes back to many charitable organizations have not built a community of support.
That's right.
It's relied on this handful of people, individuals. And as a result, I do think tax policy can change that, but we also, as charitable organizations, they need to become much more deliberate around building out that, making the case for support to a broader community.
And it's costly to do so. So I want to come back to the almost like full circle to that. When you are receiving bequests or large capital-based gifts that can be deployed to build that exact community, that's the thing that builds sustainability and scalability over time. So this is a great conversation to bring to a board. Hey, we want this community involved around this mission that we have. And so how do we deploy strategically those resources we know can come? And when they do come, have the conversation about building that exact community. Again, scalability only comes where that sustainability exists.
Yeah.
So.
Great charge. How do we do that? Every charity's community building, quote unquote, is going to look a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But it does center around communication and storytelling. Like, these are two things that we have to do with the broader base. We can't ignore that and then pretend like we can communicate twice a year and people are going to be like, oh yeah, you're my favorite. This is the best community ever. Well, it's not a community. You really, you kind of dive in once in a while. So hard, expensive, can be expensive, but I think the long-term benefits far outweigh the short-term cost to as you build that out. So as we're kind of beginning to land the plane on our conversation, either one of you, is there another data point or two that we should cover for our listeners and viewers today coming out of the Giving USA 2025 data?
It's not actually in the data itself, but it's part of the trending that I think is really important to keep an eye on. So if you're familiar with Dunham+Company, you know that we've done generational research. And as part of my presentation this week, I went back and looked at our data and found a very fascinating insight. Back in 2017, we measured the giving of millennials and other generations in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And the average millennial household back then gave $580 to charitable institutions.
Annually.
Yeah. 2025, we were measuring 2024 giving, and Gen Z gave $867 per household.
Dang.
If you adjust the $580 back in 2016 to 2024 dollars, it equals $758.
Go Gen Z.
So I mean, that's a substantial.
Is Gen Z awesome, or do millennials stink? Like,
no. I think actually,
Gen X, mate. Come
if
on.
you remember, back then millennials were actually out giving Gen X.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Gen X is the worst of the worst. We just work.
They're a very small generation too.
Yeah, thank you.
It's tough.
But I also think that millennials have hit the wall of life when expenses accelerate.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the phenomenon. And in fact, that was part of our discussion is giving generational or is it life cycle? And my answer was yes. It's both.
Yeah.
There are generational distinctives, and Gen Z is showing that.
Mm-hmm.
Greatest generation. Boomer, we all show certain distinctives as a generation, how we give and how much we give. But I do think life cycle then impacts the ability to act on that.
Absolutely.
But I would just say, that was really a fascinating finding to look at that and go, wow. And the other part is that millennials were average age of 28 back in 2016. Gen Z's average age is 20 right now.
Mm.
So, I mean, it bodes so well for the future of giving. And as we look at giving by individuals, if we will, to your point earlier, if we will engage a broader community, invite them in, keep them engaged, I think Gen Z is going to give differently, but I really do believe there's opportunity there for the future.
sounds like a negative question, but I don't intend it that way. How can we as charities mess that up? So if Gen Z early in their adulthood are showing indicators of wanting to be charitably involved more significantly, what's at risk? Like, what are things like we could do that actually hurt our chances with that generation?
Well, one of them is a bit more practical, Josh, isn't it? In terms of website and giving forms and just the discovery that we had in our research on that.
Right. Which is just like, if we make it hard for them to give, they won't. They're used to one button purchase, anything delivered in the next hour. I mean, that's the people. And so with that expectation in mind, we've got to think, well, how are we thanking them? How are we to your point about community, it was perfect because these are very community forward, my people, my network people. And so if we go quiet for any period of time, we're in trouble. Like they told us, we want monthly direct mail.
93% of Gen Z want a monthly, or will respond to direct mail.
Yeah. And they want it monthly, and they want also text message me and send me emails and anything you can get me as often. So how do we hurt ourselves? We hurt ourselves by not communicating effectively to them and leaving it at a transactional level. I think we fail if we keep it transactional. If it's just we reach out the 2 times a year where we've got a big appeal on, I think we fail. So the reporting back that includes them as like, thank you for being a part of this thing that is being done because you're involved in it. That's a great communication piece for a person who's beginning their philanthropic journey. We stuff it up if we don't do that. Yeah. And they're like, I tried that. It's not real. They just want my money. Yeah. It's like, well, that's a failure on our part.
So, and I want to camp on what you said earlier about story. There's a reason why GoFundMe is so successful. There's no intermediary organization.
Yeah.
They are basically creating a narrative of this person's challenge that they're facing and inviting you to help solve it.
Yeah.
And I think charitable institutions could take a massive lesson from that. It's making sure that we're telling the story of the people that we serve they're facing this challenge, and you have a chance to make a difference in their lives.
Yep.
And it's not about us, it's not about the organization.
Yep.
It's all about us bringing you together with this opportunity to serve an individual. So anyway, I really thought a lot about that this week because I think that's where a lot of organizations mess it up big time.
It's really good. I don't think you can kind of analyze your performance as an organization on do we talk about ourselves too much versus talk about the outcomes more. I don't think you can overanalyze that. I think you can be asking that question on an ongoing basis, like how are we becoming myopic about what we do and not really connecting the donor to the outcome. So it's good. There's a lot more data. So Rick, if I want to dive in more, where do I go to get my hands on the research?
Yeah. So Giving Foundation, givingUSAfoundation.org. Go to the homepage. It'll be right there.
Okay, cool. So I would encourage you, go download the actual study yourself, spend some time going through it. But some of the key takeaways we discussed today are the things that we think are most pertinent for organizations facing charitable giving challenges or opportunities as we walk into 2026, and we're halfway through 2026. I think based on what we have seen, a lot of the things we discussed today in 25 are continuing into 2026. And so there's a lot to be learned from that and that we can implement to help make sure we're maximizing donor engagement, maximizing our story and the impact of our charities in these days. So thank both of you for joining us today, and thank you for listening and or watching today's episode of the Cause and Effect Podcast. Join us again next time.
And thanks for listening to the Cause and Effect Podcast, a resource developed by Dunham+Company.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, do us a favor. If you like this content, subscribe, share us with a friend, leave us a review on your podcast provider, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dunham+Company to help us spread the word.
Thanks again, and join us next time as we work together towards increased effectiveness for more impact.